The grand ballroom glowed with golden light, the chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble floor. Guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand, the air thick with laughter, money, and ambition. It was the official launch of my company, a day I had worked years for. Cameras flashed, speeches were made, and everything seemed perfect until my grandfather took the stage. He was the man who had built our family empire from scratch, the man everyone respected and feared. His voice echoed through the hall as he called me to stand beside him. I walked up, my heart pounding, proud yet nervous. Then he smiled, patted my shoulder, and said into the microphone, "Everyone, meet my brilliant grandson, the future of our family legacy. I hope he liked the private jet I gifted him last week." The crowd erupted in applause. People turned toward me, cheering, clinking glasses, congratulating me as if I had just been crowned king. I stood there frozen, a smile plastered on my face while my mind raced. Private jet? What jet? My throat tightened as I forced a small laugh, nodding politely, playing along with the lie because I couldn't embarrass him in front of hundreds of people. My grandfather beamed with pride, unaware that my world had just tilted off its axis. As the applause faded and the event continued, I tried to focus on my investors, my team, the speeches, but my thoughts were elsewhere. A private jet was not a casual mistake. It meant money, power, inheritance, something huge. And if it existed, someone else had it. When the night ended and the lights dimmed, I found my grandfather sitting alone in the VIP lounge, sipping whiskey like he always did after major events. I sat beside him quietly, waiting for the right moment to speak. "Grandpa," I finally said, "you mentioned a jet earlier. Was that a joke?" He chuckled softly, his eyes distant. "No, son, you deserved it. I told the lawyers to arrange everything in your name last month." My heart skipped. Then why haven't I seen it? His expression shifted, confusion crossing his face. "You mean it wasn't delivered?" That single sentence chilled me. The room felt smaller, air thinner. He pulled out his phone, calling someone from his private contacts. I could hear only fragments of the conversation, his voice turning from calm to furious. "What do you mean the transfer never happened? Who signed it? I never authorized that." He slammed the phone down, his hand trembling. "Someone's been messing with my orders," he muttered, looking at me with regret and anger mingled in his eyes. "This isn't just about a jet. Someone in the family is trying to play God." That night, sleep was impossible. My mind replayed his words over and over. Someone in the family. Our family wasn't small. 3 sons, 2 daughters, cousins, managers, all living off his empire like bees around honey. I had always known there was competition, whispers behind closed doors, but this felt different. It wasn't rivalry anymore, it was theft. Over the next few days, I quietly began asking questions, calling the lawyers, tracing documents. The deeper I looked, the darker it became. The jet existed, it had been purchased under the company name 3 weeks before the launch. But the ownership had been transferred to another person the same day. My uncle, my grandfather's eldest son, the one who had always believed he was the rightful heir to everything. His signature was there, right next to my grandfather's, but the date and handwriting didn't match. Someone had forged it. I remember the moment I confronted him. He was sitting in his massive office, the city skyline shining behind him, acting like a king in his castle. I placed the papers on his desk and said quietly, "You forged grandfather's approval." He looked at me, calm and cold, and smiled. "You think he'll believe you? You're young, emotional, careless. He's built this empire on loyalty, and you've been away for years. You really think one jet matters?" It wasn't just the arrogance in his voice, it was the certainty. He had done this before, maybe many times, twisting reality until he looked like the hero. I walked out, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. The next morning, I went to see my grandfather again. He was in his study, the air heavy with silence. When I told him what I had found, he didn't say a word for a long time. Then he whispered, I trusted him with everything. We sat there together, both broken in our own ways. For him, it was betrayal from his own blood. For me, it was the realization that my family's wealth was built not just on business, but on deceit and manipulation. I no longer cared about the jet or the money. I just wanted the truth. At that moment, the door burst open. My uncle walked in, his voice raised, accusing me of trying to ruin the family's image. The argument escalated until my grandfather stood up, his voice trembling but powerful. Enough. If you betrayed this family, I'll strip your name from everything I own. The room went silent. My uncle glared at me, eyes burning with hatred, and stormed out. My grandfather sank into his chair, exhausted, older than I had ever seen him. The morning after the chaos, the mansion was eerily quiet. The usual laughter of servants and hum of business calls had vanished, replaced by the weight of tension that hung in every corner. My grandfather hadn't spoken to anyone since the confrontation. My uncle had disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unanswered calls and locked accounts. I sat in the office with a pile of documents scattered across the desk, trying to piece together the truth. Every file, every signature, every bank transaction told a story of deception that stretched far beyond a stolen jet. It was about the company itself, my grandfather's empire, the one he had trusted his eldest son to protect. The lawyers arrived before noon, their faces pale. They handed me folders that contained a copy of my grandfather's will, or what appeared to be one. The more I read, the more my stomach turned. Entire sections of the company had been transferred quietly into shell corporations under my uncle's name. Offshore accounts, false invoices, fake board approvals, it was all there. The same forged signature that had stolen the jet appeared again and again, this time stealing millions. My hands trembled as I flipped the pages. My grandfather had built his life from the ground up, brick by brick, deal by deal, and now it was crumbling from within his own bloodline. When I finally walked into his study, he was sitting in the same armchair, staring at an old photo of his children. His eyes looked tired, but behind the sadness, there was fire. He asked me quietly to sit. "Tell me everything," he said. I placed the files on his desk and watched his hands shake as he turned each page. Minutes passed in silence until he slammed his fist down, the photo frame rattling. "He destroyed everything I stood for," he whispered. I saw tears well up in his eyes for the first time in my life. "I built this for them, for family." And he turned it into a weapon. That evening, the board meeting was called. Every director, every shareholder, every major investor attended. Rumors had already begun spreading about what had happened at the launch and the fight that followed. When my grandfather entered the room, the chatter died instantly. He looked older than I had ever seen him, but his presence still commanded silence. I sat beside him as he opened the meeting. His voice was steady but heavy with emotion. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to address a betrayal." He presented the evidence one by one, the forged documents, the false accounts, the manipulated ownership transfers. Gasps echoed around the room. Some directors looked away in shame, others whispered in disbelief. My uncle wasn't there, but his shadow lingered over every word. Finally, my grandfather turned to me. "My grandson discovered this. He did what none of us had the courage to do. From this day forward, he is the rightful CEO of this company." The announcement hit like thunder. The room broke into murmurs. Some clapped softly, others sat frozen. I felt no joy, only an ache that came from realizing the cost of truth. My grandfather stood tall, but his hands trembled as he handed me the company seal. "You will fix what he broke," he said. The meeting ended in silence, but before anyone could leave, the doors burst open. My uncle walked in. His face was pale, eyes red, and rage radiated from him like heat. "You think you can steal what's mine?" he shouted. "You're old and senile, and he's just a kid with no idea how this world works." Before my grandfather could respond, I stood up. My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "You stole from him, from all of us. You forged his name, you lied to the family, and you destroyed his trust. This company isn't yours anymore." For a moment, no one breathed. Then he laughed, bitter and broken. "You think you're better than me? You'll see what loyalty costs in this family." He turned and stormed out, slamming the doors behind him. That night, the house was filled with arguments and whispers. Lawyers came and went, papers were signed, accounts frozen. My grandfather barely spoke, but when he did, his voice carried the pain of a man betrayed by his own blood. I stayed with him until late, watching him gaze out the window into the darkness. "Money makes men blind," he said softly. "But love for family can make them foolish." I was both. In the following weeks, the chaos deepened. News spread to the media. Headlines screamed of scandal, betrayal, and corporate theft. Investors pulled out, employees panicked, and the company's value plummeted overnight. I spent sleepless nights trying to hold it all together, meetings, press conferences, legal battles. My uncle disappeared completely, but the damage he left behind bled into everything. One evening, I came home to find my grandfather sitting in the garden, wrapped in a blanket. The moonlight made his silver hair glow softly. When he saw me, he smiled faintly. "You did well," he said. "You saved what could be saved." I knelt beside him, unsure what to say. I didn't save it, I whispered. I just tried to protect your name. He took my hand gently. Then you've done more than I ever could. A week later, he passed away in his sleep. The doctor said it was his heart, but I knew it was something deeper, the pain of seeing his own family destroy what he loved most. His funeral was simple, private, and quiet. My uncle never showed up. As I stood by the grave, watching the last handful of earth fall onto the coffin, I made a silent promise. I would rebuild everything, not for wealth, not for power, but for the man who believed in legacy and honesty.